sallallahu alaihi wasallam allegedly wanting to commit suicide, and a report which was shared by certain people. It was also shared by Abdullah Gondal. Now, I think it's an extract from Tabari, where the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, when he first encounters revelation, he has like a panic attack, like he's this anxiety kind of attack, and he's he goes, he kind of like, he's very shaken by the whole process, and he goes to, in this narration, and he goes to Khadija, and he says to her that, embrace me, embrace me. And that part is a very well known part, but he says in this narration that I am either a poet, I'm either a poet or a madman. Now, this is, I think, in some of the narrations of Tabari. So, some people had brought this. I think Abdullah Gondal, I didn't read his full post, but I think this criticism was that, is this kind of like insulting? Is the Prophet himself acknowledging that he is a madman? Look, firstly, I want to say that this is not an authentic transmission, okay, just to clear this up. But let's go with, even if this were, even if something like this did happen, and there is the thing on the suicide as well. The Prophet wanted to end his life. There's a hadith in Bukhari that he would go and wanted to throw himself, and that is deemed blasphemous, and once again it's a problem with Sahih Bukhari. But let's today roll with those, because those hadith are not acceptable, but let's roll with today them being acceptable. Let's just say they are. Let's roll with this. Right, so this thing, it isn't something that, a person is saying, they're not doing a medical diagnosis. They're not saying like, here's my mental health check. This is that, look, we have an understanding that was, first of all, it's very loosely transmitted, because there were no real, like at the time the Prophet is telling his wife. And remember, in early Islam, there were no Muslims. So this is years and years and years later, people are hearing from someone, and they're rewording things, and they're paraphrasing, and they're doing things. But anyway, let's go with it. This is a person, this is an explanation that the Prophet, when he's encountered revelation, he's shaken by the whole process. And it doesn't make sense to him that what is going on. And as I explained earlier on today, a sha'ir, a poet, they didn't used to think of poets the way we think of poets, as in somebody who just says poetry like Ghalib or Mir, or just like romanticizes, or no, to them poets were like soothsayers. They were like shamans. They were people that used to make things rhyme and say these, but they would enter into a kind of trance. And that's what they would generally used to call sha'irs. And then from that trance-like shaman comes the regular kind of sha'ir as well. He emerges from that, who's just a regular poet. And hence the word sha'ir in Arabic comes from the root emotion, like your awareness, because he's somebody who's he's gaining this awareness. He's entering a new kind of stage of awareness, a trance, if you like, and this is the sha'ir. So, right now, my point is, now this experience, when the Prophet experiences this revelation, it doesn't, like he's shaking, it doesn't make sense to him. What's going on? Why is this? Am I seeing things? Did I imagine that? Have I become like this person in a trance? Have I lost my mind? Have I become, have I lost my mind? Surely this couldn't have happened, what I just thought happened. These are I'm just saying, these are very normal human reactions to things, okay? They're not something, it's not a health check report. In fact, the thing about being you know, the thing about being insane, being mental, is that one does not know that they are mental. You know, hence the whole book, Catch-22. You know, the whole, you know, where the whole phrase of Catch-22 comes, where he's a soldier and he's trying to get out of the war, and he tries to declare himself mental, but it's a Catch-22 because of the whole thing. Because if you can, you know, if you know, like, you can't be, like, to be mental truly, you can't know that you're mental. But the point is that, look, this isn't a kind of, hey, this is a holistic kind of diagnosis and prognosis. This is a reaction. What we're saying is, some people have allegedly said that the Prophet, this was a reaction, that he said that, whatever, you know, am I entering this kind, have I become this person that enters into trances? Have I, you know, did I just hallucinate? Did I see that? Was that real? Am I losing my mind? What's going on? And even personally, I would say, even if, you know, I know most scholars, you know, they don't accept the suicide hadith as authentic, which once again adds to the whole Bukhari gate thing. But that said, even if you did accept it, like even if you roll with it, I think in it shows an incredible human connection, one that many people can relate to. That when the Prophet, because the story is that, oh, when the Prophet received revelation, for a substantial period of time there was no more revelation, and he began to really think that, what, you know, did I imagine this? What was going on? And this anxious restlessness became so turbulent that, according to that narration, the Prophet contemplated ending it all, let's say. Now firstly, that narration is not acceptable. But even if we did go with it, is this not just a resonance, a connection with regular human beings, who, when they undergo such turmoil, such kind of turbulence at a psychological, at an emotional level, that they can't handle, that they feel that, you know, maybe what's going on? And people sometimes, you know, they have this thing that, let's just throw the towel in, let's give up. But that's not the way. If this be true, now most people have not accepted the narration as true, but I'm just saying, if anything, it just had that human element to show that people can relate to the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam, and that he too could relate to them. I think, personally, you know, I don't think that it is authentic, but that said, even if you went with it, to me it's not a kind of like a hit. If anything, it only adds to the amazing human character of the Prophet sallallahu alaihi wasallam. Somebody who understood internal turmoil, who understood that, you know, that there's points in life where a person could be driven to almost despair, and hence revelation reinforcing the message that do not despair. So if anything, I see this still, even if you roll with it, even if you go with it, I still see it as a, you know, as something with a meaningful lesson. I don't see it as a weakness. I don't see it as something I don't see as something that detracts from the messenger of God, Muhammad, peace and blessings be upon him. So that's my thing. So I wanted to respond to that there. And look, we've got to remember as well, if you take this as a kind of rule, that look, in early Islam there weren't many people around to later tell the stories. There weren't many Muslims. So all the stories about early Islam are definitely being passed through a couple of people. Definitely. And you see, this is why it's always important to understand how memory works, how transmission works, And, you know, you've got, and I've been through this before, you've got amazing studies in psychology. Bartlett's, you know, his Story of the Ghosts, for example, is an amazing research study which shows that people will always appropriate. So in that study, he mentions how, I mean, this was a study that, you know, from the last century when he I believe it was in Cambridge. He did this with people who were very, you know, they were very talented, skilled. He got them to read a story. It's only a brief story. It's like, I think, half a page long or something. It's just a description of some people going hunting. But they are, I think, Native Americans that are going hunting. But he got a bunch of participants who were from England, English, Cambridge University students to go over this. Then they had time to remember it. And then I think the next day, he gave them like 24 hours or something. This is Bartlett and his study within psychology. Now, on memory. And then he gave them, the next day, he gave them he allowed them to go over the story again. They did. And then he asked them to kind of put it away, and they had to sum it up they had to re-narrate it, basically, in their own words. And it's interesting that even though the majority of them did, you know, get the gist of the story, but the story is quite vague. It's not quite, like, it has a vagueness to it. Now, what's interesting is the vast majority of them substituted words that they assumed. So, for example, because they go out on this canoe. Now, I think it's called something else, but they called it a canoe because they weren't familiar with the other kind of boat. And the person went hunting, the kind of people in the story went hunting seals. But because they weren't familiar with that, they transmitted it as they went fishing. And this is the overall majority. And it's interesting how, you see, memory is a constructive agent. It's not something passive. As you recall things, you recall them with your frame of mind, your understanding of the world. So that's why when people transmitted things afterwards, you have to take this into consideration. So I hope that helps. Remember this always, that early Islam, they weren't people to narrate what happened. This is going through a number of people. Okay. Cool, guys. I hope that helps. Let's move on. What else is going on, people?